Good morning.
Good morning.
So nice to see you all here today.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me back.
all right.
And as the title says, I really did think I made a mistake once, but I was wrong. I once heard that actually from one of the philosophers I worked in the supermarkets with when I was a teenager. And I thought that's a pretty good statement. And I realized in my spiritual awakening there is a lot of sense to that. Because most of us can easily rattle off a litany of experiences we commonly perceive as mistakes in our life. We've had jobs that didn't work out. We have had pursued education that did not produce the desired results. And most of us will admit to a relationship or two where we wish we'd listened to our friends. Dr. Holmes writes in the textbook that the practitioner must know that no past mistake can hinder or obstruct the flow of divine intelligence through God's idea, which is perfect man, or human, as we might prefer to say in today's politically correct times, manifesting the attributes of God in freedom, happiness, activity, and power, and that this truth is now made manifest in our lives. Understanding the science of mind brings us to a place where we recognize every event in our journey has been revealed to allow us opportunities to recreate ourselves. We are not trapped in a predestined course with no prospect to change. Our station at birth is not our fate. Our skin color, religion, or father's occupation does not define who we are. Understanding science of mind brings us to a place where we recognize that we are individualized expressions of the divine power. Holmes writes again, healing is not creating a perfect body or a perfect idea. It is revealing an idea which is already perfect. The perfection of our being is the truth of our being. Each page of our story is written to lay the foundation for the pages that follow. In the theater, it is said that if a character carries a shotgun onto the stage and hangs it above the fireplace in the first act, it damn well better go off before the end of the play. Fiction writers create worlds and populate them with characters to tell a story. Any event that unfolds to affect the story's conclusion must be supported by a foundation laid early in the telling. Evidence that convicts the criminal cannot just appear in the trial scene. It must be connected to the victim in prior narration. In our story, the place we find ourselves today is the result less of careful planning and more the consequence of countless decisions. Each decision laying the foundation for an experience that leads to another decision, and so on, and so on. Holmes writes, it is not that we have made no mistakes, but if the belief in the necessity of mistakes stays in the consciousness, then there is bound to be a repetition. It is scientific practice to declare that there have been no mistakes in man's consciousness. That if there have been any, they are now wiped away. We all have moments of regret. Words we wish we could take back. Actions triggered without fully thinking through the consequences. It is the human experience that not all our choices are made with the purest intent. We stray from our truth. Ask in these moments, though, is this me? Is this who I am? The answer is no. It was a moment, and this is the next moment. How we feel about that moment a moment ago lays the foundation for a moment from now. Understanding that there are no mistakes allows us to absorb that moment as a learning experience whose only power is the power we choose to give it. Holmes writes, "We do not say that man cannot sin. What we say is that he does sin or make mistakes, and he is thereby automatically punished as long as he continues to make mistakes. But bondage is not real to the universe, and sin is not real to God." Holmes is putting the entire textbook pretty much in one paragraph here. And he's reminding us that spirit is perfect. It can't make mistakes on its own. And we as human beings, as individualized expressions of that perfection, have to play by the same rules. Therefore, those things that we may perceive to be mistakes are really just experiences laying the foundation for the next experience. We may wish we didn't have to have so many experiences sometimes. We do have regrets as human beings. We are blessed with freedom of choice. When we stray from our truth, we experience less enjoyable consequences. If we allow ourselves to think we are less than our divine truth, we get to experience our belief in countless ways. We've talked about this so many times before. The universe always says yes. When we believe we do not deserve something, the universe will provide us with a wealth of lack. Because that's what we believe. When we believe we are true and loving people, we will find true and loving people surrounding us everywhere. When we recognize the beauty of the divine in everyone else, we will find people that we would probably walk across the street to avoid suddenly holding doors open for us and saying, "Have a nice day." And we find ourselves going, wow, was I judging that person from some strange perspective, and allowing their visual presentation to me to trigger memories and thoughts within my past that made me think that I can't be safe around that person, or I can't trust that person, and here they are, just being human, just expressing love as purely and simply as I would want them to. And I can now make a choice. I can beat myself up for being such an idiot. Or I can say to myself, boy, there's an opportunity for me to learn not to be so quick to judge people by what they look like. That doesn't say don't remain cautious when the situation calls for it. But remember too that people don't have to look the way I think they need to look to be good people and loving people and joyous people. If we allow ourselves to think that we are less and we get to experience our belief, we find ourselves in dead-end jobs or unhappy relationships. We deny our own good by avoiding opportunities to prosper or create beauty in our lives. If we think that we don't deserve, that somebody might have a casual conversation that says, oh, you might want to check this out. And we think to ourselves, no, that won't work for me. I'm not going to do that. Where if we maybe made the other choice, if we had that conversation, if we went to that meeting 2 years down the road, 2 weeks down the road, we might find ourselves saying, that was a really fortunate experience, that I stumbled across that person, that notice in the newspaper, that message on the television or wherever we saw it, and chose to take a chance. chose to step out of our comfort zone, stretch our horizon just a little bit, and suddenly find that the universe was willing to fill in that entire space with good and joyous experiences. When we recognize our sin, when we recognize our misstep and recognize it does not define us, we step right back into grace and move on. No harm, no foul. Simply move on to the next experience. Holmes writes again, Spirit cannot make a mistake, cannot withhold from my system anything that the system needs. Spirit is infinite, meaning everything within our experience is a product of Spirit. Everything we know, think, feel is created from the same source. In fact, it already exists within the source, it's just waiting for us to give it form in our mind so that it can appear and be part of our experience. This overriding fact of our teaching tells us that even our most grievous departures from our spiritual truth are nothing more than a page, paragraph, or sentence laid in place to support the telling of our story. Holmes imagines God saying something akin to, if I wish to have a man who is a real being, I must give him self-choice. He must be spontaneous, not automatic. This is the basis for my belief that God God revels in our misdeeds, misdirections, and perceived mistakes, because in its perfection, Spirit could never create our experiences, and the universe would be doomed to the predictability of mathematics and physics. And quite frankly, what fun is there in having the immortality of the infinite if every conclusion is predictable? We make mistakes in our lives, or what appear to be mistakes, only to find out that they really are just the foundation of a new experience. I've had times when I wish something hadn't happened. It wasn't in the game plan. My day wasn't supposed to turn out like this. And yet, the experience turned out to be loving and beautiful. Case in point, in a room very much like this, a little larger. I was in a workshop, and I was doing a one-on-one experience with another participant. And I was feeling pretty good that day. And I knew that particular person had some issues, and I thought I was going to make an impact on those issues. So we started doing a face-to-face one-on-one exercise with everybody sitting back there watching, and I was kind of poking his buttons, and I was kind of dancing around him like a snake in a basket, and just doing a little of this and a little of that, and coming in close, getting right up in his face, backing off a little bit, and suddenly, in the back of my mind, I remembered this person, I've been advised, has a tendency toward violence. And so now I'm up so close to him that I'm thinking I'm probably not in the best possible position right now. However, something I had said had triggered an emotion in him that broke down his resistance to his own truth. I did not know that. What I knew was he suddenly reached out for me quickly and suddenly, that's all I can say, and I saw his arms coming, and I realized at the time he outweighed me. Today I could probably take him, but this is a few years ago. So in my head I'm thinking, here's this person with known violent tendencies reaching out for me and I'm way too close. I can't get away from him. I definitely can't take him down. But I can wrap my arms around his and keep him from doing anything that could hurt me. What I didn't take into effect is that physics does work every time, and that his forward motion with my arms wrapped around him now meant we were both going over backwards. And when we got done rolling around on the floor for a second, I looked down at my foot and I said, my foot's facing south. My leg is facing east. There's something wrong with this picture. And in that same moment, I realized that he meant me no harm. He was embracing me because he had this overwhelming joy, and he wanted to embrace me. I totally had misinterpreted it, and now I'm laying there with a beautifully broken ankle. Feeling no pain whatsoever because the body immediately goes into shock, but realizing I am not standing up. And suddenly the whole room is around me like, oh. And a moment later, the paramedics were there, and I continued to have the most wonderful experience based on this mishap, this misinterpretation, this kind of ruined day, because I realized as I was laying in the emergency room that right next to me was the hospital's chapel. And I could hear people going in there, and some of them were sad and crying because they just lost a loved one. And others were just, trying to find some comfort. And all of the people responsible for the workshop were very good to me. They were afraid I was going to sue them, so it was, very much in their interest to make sure I was okay. But afterwards, when they actually patched me up enough that I went back to the workshop, then I don't know if it was later that day or the same day, I forget which now, it's kind of lost that day. But everyone was so wonderful. And there was just so much love coming through. And even though I didn't get to finish the workshop exactly as planned, I got so much more out of it. Because suddenly all of my barriers broke down, my internal barriers. I was much less attuned to who I really am than those days. That workshop did wonders for me. I will give them credit. Not the way anybody planned for it to work, but it worked. And it seriously changed my perspective on things. And seriously changed his perspective on things. And later when we had our final wrap party, basically, his wife came up to me and said, I don't know what happened, but thank you, thank you, thank you. Something really changed in him that day. So we have these things that happen that we don't plan on happening. But Spirit doesn't make mistakes. And, we've all heard that famous saying that God laughs while we make while we're making plans, God laughs, that sort of thing. And that's really the truth of Spirit. It's the truth of this entire teaching, is that every experience we have is simply a foundation for the next experience. So even if it doesn't look the way we think it should look, we have the opportunity to choose how we choose to look at it and embrace it as an opportunity to grow and to love and to be more like the God whose image we are made in. Loving, creative, powerful, joyous, and beautiful. Thank you.